Why you miss someone who hurt you. There's a moment almost every survivor carries in secret, not the moment you left. Not the moment you blocked him. Not the moment you stopped responding. The secret moment comes after all of that. When despite everything he did, your body still misses him. And that moment feels humiliating. It feels confusing. It feels like proof that something must be wrong with you. But what if missing him doesn't mean love? What if missing him means your nervous system hasn't learned another way to breathe yet? A woman told me, I felt almost ashamed saying it out loud. After everything he put me through, how could I miss him? And that question is exactly where trauma bond hides. Not in the relationship itself, but in the aftermath. Not during the chaos, but during the silence that follows it. Because emotional addiction isn't loud, it's quiet. It whispers things like maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe he'll change. Maybe I shouldn't have left. Trauma bond rewrites memory like a soft voice pretending to be love. Missing him doesn't prove love. Missing him proves conditioning. Your nervous system was trained to survive him, depend on him, and subconsciously seek the relief that only came after the pain he caused. The cycle became your emotional oxygen. And when emotional oxygen disappears, your nervous system panics even if the oxygen was toxic. The body doesn't crave love, it craves familiarity. And familiar danger feels safer than unfamiliar peace. So when you miss him, your nervous system isn't remembering love, it's remembering relief. The relief that used to come only after punishment. And that relief felt like connection. Connection that felt like love. Love that felt necessary to survive. Trauma bond dresses itself as affection. Because the nervous system associates danger with attachment. This is why missing him feels like heartbreak. But trauma bond isn't heartbreak, it's withdrawal. Missing him is the withdrawal phase of emotional addiction, not romantic longing. And here's the part that hurts. Your mind knows he hurt you. But your body remembers the cycle differently. The cycle promised temporary safety. And your nervous system confuses safety with attachment. So if you're missing someone who hurt you, hear this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. Your nervous system is reacting exactly the way it was conditioned to react. Trauma bond doesn't disappear when the relationship ends. It often activates after the relationship ends. Stay with me because, in the next part, we're going to talk about why pain and longing arrive together, and why your nervous system thinks danger feels like home. Why pain and longing arrive together. Most people assume pain should push you away from a person. But in trauma bonds, pain and longing appear at the same time. The pain makes you miss him more, not less. And that contradiction feels impossible to understand until you realize your nervous system learned to associate emotional relief with the very person who caused emotional injury. A woman once told me, the more he hurt me, the closer I felt to him. That sentence sounds irrational from the outside, but inside the nervous system, it makes perfect sense. If every emotional injury was followed by a moment of affection, or at least a temporary end to the tension, your brain starts believing that closeness is a reward for surviving pain. Here's what trauma bond does. It wounds you. Then it soothes you. Then it wounds you again. Then it soothes you again. And eventually, the soothing feels like proof of love. Even though the soothing only exists because the wound exists, you weren't being loved, you were being stabilized. So when the cycle ends, your nervous system remembers the stabilization, not the injury. The mind remembers the suffering, but the body remembers the relief. This is why longing and pain arrive as a pair. Your body isn't asking for him, it's asking for the chemical release that used to follow the pain he caused. Oxytocin, dopamine, adrenaline, these are survival chemicals. And trauma bond turns survival chemicals into emotional attachment. You're not missing him. You're missing the biological relief your nervous system expects after emotional distress. Think of it like this. If someone hits you, and then immediately gives you water, your brain associates water with safety. It doesn't matter that the same person caused the harm. Your nervous system only recognizes who ended the pain, not who created it. That's why dangerous relationships create the feeling of deep connection. You weren't deeply connected, you were deeply conditioned. And this is the part most survivors don't see. The trauma bond wasn't about romance at all. It was a survival adaptation. Your body bonded with the person it depended on for emotional regulation, even when that emotional regulation came after emotional destruction. So when you feel longing, you're not longing for him, you're longing for missing pieces of yourself. Pieces that were never nurtured, only temporarily soothed. Missing him is not love. It's the nervous system asking, where is the pattern that used to calm me after chaos? That pattern is gone now. And the body panics until it learns something new. In the next part, I'll explain why your nervous system confuses him with safety, even when he was the danger. Your body remembers him even when your mind doesn't want to. There's a reason you keep thinking about him even when you don't want to. The mind understands logic. The nervous system understands repetition. And repetition becomes memory, not the conscious kind, but the physiological kind. The memory isn't stored in thought. It's stored in feeling. A woman once told me, I knew he was toxic. But every time I woke up, he was the first thought in my mind. What she described wasn't longing. It was nervous system conditioning. Your body isn't remembering love. Your body is remembering survival. Here's the part no one explains. Your nervous system memorizes patterns, not intentions. If every emotional wound was followed by emotional relief, your nervous system stores the relief as a reward. Even if the relief was toxic, temporary, or manipulative, the body doesn't ask whether it's healthy. The body only asks, did this reduce fear? If the answer is yes, the body records it as safety. So after the relationship ends, your body continues scanning for what it used to depend on. That scan feels like missing him, but it's not love. It's the nervous system searching for the emotional pattern it was conditioned to rely on. Think of it like phantom pain after losing a limb. The body keeps feeling what's no longer there. That doesn't mean the limb is real. It means the body memorized its presence. Trauma bond works the same way. The person is gone, but the pattern remains. This is why your mind says, I need to move on, while your body says, but we can't survive without him. Body and mind are speaking different languages. The mind speaks logic. The body speaks memory. Healing is translating one into the other. Here's something powerful. Your body isn't betraying you. Your body is protecting you. It doesn't realize the danger is over. The nervous system only understands that the emotional regulator is missing. So it reacts with panic, sadness, longing, confusion, not because it wants him back, but because it wants the stabilization that used to follow the chaos. In trauma bond, missing him isn't emotional longing, it's emotional withdrawal. Your body isn't asking for the person, it's asking for the neurological pattern that helped it survive emotional injury. And here's what matters most. The nervous system will eventually catch up with the truth your mind already knows. That process takes time, not shame, not blame. In the next part, I'll explain why trauma bond gets strongest right when you try to end it, and why that doesn't mean you're going backwards. It means your brain is reprogramming. When survival becomes attachment, approximately equals 3,000 characters. There's a moment in toxic relationships when something subtle but life-changing happens. Survival stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like attachment. Not because you chose the attachment, but because your nervous system learned that the only way to stay emotionally alive was to stay connected to the source of danger. A woman told me, every time he left, I felt like I couldn't breathe. That sentence isn't romantic. It's physiological. When someone repeatedly pulls away, your nervous system goes into panic and relief over and over again, until panic becomes anticipation and relief becomes reassurance. That cycle is what attachment begins to feel like. You weren't attached because it was love. You were attached because your nervous system wired itself around him. Trauma bond takes emotional survival and disguises it as emotional devotion. It's not affection. It's dependency. Dependency built through emotional unpredictability. If punishment is followed by temporary comfort, the nervous system confuses the comfort for safety. So instead of bonding to the person, you bond to the relief. And here's the most painful part. The relief only exists because the pain existed first. Think of it like holding your breath underwater and finally coming up for air. The breath feels precious, not because air is love, but because you were deprived of it. Trauma bond works the same way. Every moment of calm feels meaningful because you had to emotionally suffocate first. This is why even when you leave, your body continues searching for him, not because it wants him back, but because it wants the release it used to get after emotional tension. The nervous system keeps waiting for the next relief, and without him, the relief never arrives. So the body believes something is missing. And here's what most people misunderstand. Trauma bond doesn't end when the relationship ends. Trauma bond ends when the nervous system stops associating relief with the person. That takes time, not strength, not willpower time. Your brain needs to rewire its understanding of safety. Which is why missing him doesn't mean love. Missing him means the rewiring hasn't completed yet. And here's the truth, the world never taught you. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because your nervous system believed leaving meant emotional death. It wasn't love. It wasn't blindness. It was survival. And survival is the most human instinct you have. In the next part, I'll explain why your body keeps remembering him long after. Your mind knows better and why. That memory isn't romantic. It's neurological conditioning. Your body remembers him even when your mind doesn't want to. There's a reason you keep thinking about him even when you don't want to. The mind understands logic. The nervous system understands repetition. And repetition becomes memory, not the conscious kind, but the physiological kind. The memory isn't stored in thought. It's stored in feeling. A woman once told me, I knew he was toxic. But every time I woke up, he was the first thought in my mind. What she described wasn't longing, it was nervous system conditioning. Your body isn't remembering love. Your body is remembering survival. Here's the part no one explains. Your nervous system memorizes patterns, not intentions. If every emotional wound was followed by emotional relief, your nervous system stores the relief as a reward. Even if the relief was toxic, temporary, or manipulative, the body doesn't ask whether it's healthy. The body only asks, did this reduce fear? If the answer is yes, the body records it as safety. So after the relationship ends, your body continues scanning for what it used to depend on. That scan feels like missing him. But it's not love. It's the nervous system searching for the emotional pattern it was conditioned to rely on. Think of it like phantom pain. After losing a limb, body keeps feeling what's no longer there. That doesn't mean the limb is real. It means the body memorized its presence. Trauma bond works the same way. The person is gone, but the pattern remains. This is why your mind says, I need to move on, while your body says, but we can't survive without him. Body and mind are speaking different languages. The mind speaks logic. The body speaks memory. Healing is translating one into the other. Here's something powerful. Your body isn't betraying you. Your body is protecting you. It doesn't realize the danger is over. The nervous system only understands that the emotional regulator is missing. So it reacts with panic, sadness, longing, confusion, not because it wants him back, but because it wants the stabilization that used to follow the chaos. In trauma bond, missing him isn't emotional longing, it's emotional withdrawal. Your body isn't asking for the person, it's asking for the neurological pattern that helped it survive emotional injury. And here's what matters most. The nervous system will eventually catch up with the truth your mind already knows. That process takes time, not shame, not blame. In the next part, I'll explain why trauma bond gets strongest right when you try to end it, and why that doesn't mean you're going backwards. It means your brain is reprogramming. Why the bond gets stronger right when you try to break it. Most people assume the trauma bond ends when the relationship ends. But anyone who has lived it knows the opposite is true. The moment you finally walk away is the moment the bond fights the hardest to survive. It doesn't weaken, it intensifies. And that intensity feels like proof that you still love him. But intensity isn't love. Intensity is the nervous system resisting change. Here's something rarely discussed. Your nervous system doesn't want emotional peace, it wants emotional predictability. And predictability, even painful predictability, feels safer than the unknown. When you break the cycle, the nervous system loses the rhythm it depended on. That loss feels like threat. A woman told me, I thought leaving would make everything easier. But it was the hardest part. That's because survivors don't just confront heartbreak, they confront withdrawal, identity collapse, emotional confusion, and neurological rewiring all at once. Leaving isn't the end of trauma. Leaving is the beginning of detox. And detox feels worse before it feels better. Think of trauma like emotional gravity. Your nervous system learned to orbit around him, even if that orbit was destructive. When you step out of the orbit, your nervous system panics, trying to pull you back into the gravitational field it already knows. That pull feels like missing him. But what you're actually feeling is the body trying to return to emotional equilibrium, even if that equilibrium was toxic. Here's the paradox. You feel the most attached right when the attachment is actually dissolving. This is why so many survivors say, I almost went back. The moment of almost going back is the moment the bond is breaking internally. The nervous system fights for the pattern, Because the pattern feels like survival. Trauma bond intensifies before it dissolves. And here's the most important thing. Feeling pulled back isn't failure. Feeling overwhelmed isn't regression. Feeling emotional panic isn't love. It's withdrawal. You're not being pulled back to him. You're being pulled back to the version of you that survived him. When the nervous system loses its coping strategy, it tries to reinstall the previous one even if that strategy was killing you emotionally. This is biology, not romance. So when the bond feels strongest, you're not going backwards. You're crossing the most dangerous part of healing. The moment your nervous system realizes the cycle is ending. In the next part, I'll explain what happens when the nervous system finally stops fighting and why the silence that follows feels empty, not peaceful. When silence feels like losing a part of yourself, after the panic, after the longing, after the moments where you almost went back, something unexpected arrives. Silence. But it's not peaceful silence. It's hollow, heavy, unsettling. It feels like a part of you disappeared with him, even though that part never belonged to him in the first place. A woman wrote, "I thought leaving would give me freedom, but instead it felt like I had no identity left." That sentence reveals the hidden truth of trauma bond. You didn't attach to him, you attached to the role you played while surviving him. And when the cycle ends, the role disappears. The version of you that existed for him dissolves. Space that feels like absence. This silence feels like grief. Not because you lost love, but because you lost your emotional function. Your nervous system spent months, maybe years, organizing itself around his moods, his silence, his guilt, his needs, his emotional climate, without the responsibility of managing him. Your nervous system doesn't know who you are. Survival mode was your identity. Of course, silence feels threatening. Your nervous system believes something essential is missing. But what's missing isn't him. What's missing is the emotional emergency that used to give your nervous system purpose. That urgency is gone now. And without urgency, you feel empty. This is the moment survivors often confuse with missing him. But emptiness doesn't mean longing, it means your nervous system lost the battlefield it was trained to fight on. And war feels like identity when peace is unfamiliar. This is why silence hurts. Silence forces your nervous system to face itself. And that confrontation feels terrifying because it reveals everything the relationship kept hidden. Loneliness, insecurity, pain from the past, unresolved, abandonment wounds, all the things the trauma bond was distracting you from. Silence is exposure. But here's the part that matters. Silence isn't the end of you, it's the return to you. Right now, your nervous system is grieving the collapse of a role you were never meant to carry. That grief feels like loss, but loss is space. And space is where your real identity begins to reappear. Not the self who survived him, the self who existed before him. In the next part, I'll show you how that emptiness slowly transforms into neutrality and why neutrality, not confidence, is the first sign of real healing. When missing him turns into neutrality, there's a stage in this process that almost no one recognizes while it's happening. It doesn't come with a dramatic shift. It doesn't arrive with empowerment or certainty. It arrives quietly, through you don't suddenly feel strong, you simply stop reacting. A woman wrote, "One day I realized I wasn't checking my phone anymore." That wasn't strength, it was neutrality. Neutrality is when your nervous system stops expecting emotional relief from the person who caused emotional harm. It doesn't mean you're healed. It means your nervous system has begun detaching from the pattern. Neutrality is the opposite of obsession, not the opposite of love. Obsession is a trauma response. Neutrality is a healing response. Before, every silence felt threatening. Now, silence feels like nothing. Before, every thought triggered panic. Now, thoughts pass like weather. You don't feel excited. You don't feel devastated. You just feel quiet. And this quiet is an emptiness, it's space. Space where your nervous system finally stops rehearsing responses to someone who isn't even there. Space where your emotional oxygen returns. Space where your identity slowly starts breathing again. Survivors often think neutrality means they're finally over him. But neutrality doesn't always announce itself as relief. Sometimes it arrives as calm boredom, as if your body is silently saying, "I don't need this anymore." Here's the truth. Missing him doesn't fade because feelings disappear. Missing him fades because the survival system stops sending emotional alarms. Your nervous system learns. He's not the source of safety anymore. And once the nervous system stops expecting him, the craving dissolves not quickly, but gradually, like a volume being turned down one click at a time. This stage doesn't feel powerful. It feels uneventful, almost anticlimactic. That's exactly why most people don't notice it. Healing rarely feels like triumph. Healing feels like neutrality. That neutrality is the nervous system's way of saying, we survived, we're done. And once the nervous system is done, something extraordinary happens. The longing that once felt unbearable becomes a memory that no longer holds emotional control. In the next part, you'll see how neutrality slowly becomes freedom, not because you don't remember him, but because you finally remember yourself more. It was never love holding you there, it was the wound. There's a moment in healing when a quiet truth finally rises to the surface. It doesn't come in a dramatic realization, and it rarely comes through thought. It comes through a feeling small, steady, undeniable. You weren't attached to him because he loved you. You were attached because a wound inside you recognized something familiar in him. A woman once told me, the scariest part was realizing, I never actually loved him, I loved who I wanted him to be. That confession reveals one of the deepest layers of trauma bond. The attachment forms around the hope of healing an older wound, not around the person standing in front of you. Trauma bond doesn't begin with romance. It begins with recognition. Recognition of emotional patterns that resemble childhood abandonment, emotional inconsistency, or the fear of being unseen. The nervous system doesn't connect to the partner. It connects to the familiarity of the wound. And here's the painful irony. You weren't staying for the love you were receiving. You were staying for the love you kept trying to give. The relationship felt meaningful. Not because he was meaningful, but because the emotional labor reminded your nervous system of a role it learned long before him. A role built around fixing, pleasing, enduring, proving, earning affection that never arrives freely. You weren't trying to be loved, you were trying to be enough. That wound is what held you there. And the moment you finally see that truth, the entire narrative shifts. You stop asking, why did I love him? And start asking, why did my wound choose him? And the answer is rarely about the relationship. The answer is almost always about emotional conditioning from years before this person ever entered your life. That's why trauma bond feels spiritual, intense, destined, because the wound believes it found the person who can finally resolve the pain. But what actually happens is the pain gets repeated instead of healed. You didn't bond with the man. You bonded with the emotional script he activated. And when that script dissolves, the attachment dissolves. Not quickly, not dramatically, quietly. And the quiet is where healing begins. Because once the nervous system realizes, the wound can't be healed by repeating the pattern, it stops returning to the pain. And when the body stops returning to pain, longing turns into distance. Distance turns into clarity. Clarity turns into peace. In the next part, we'll close this chapter by transforming everything. You've survived into the beginning of your emotional freedom, and we'll talk about what comes after missing him finally ends. Missing him was a chapter. Remembering yourself is the story. There comes a moment, often unannounced, where something inside you shifts, not because he changed, not because you finally got closure, not because time magically healed anything, but because your nervous system stopped waiting for him. You wake up one day and realize that missing him isn't the core of your identity anymore. Not because you forced yourself to let go, but because your body finally did. A woman wrote, "One day I realized I wasn't fighting myself anymore. I wasn't trying not to miss him. I simply didn't." That moment isn't a celebration. It's a quiet arrival. Healing doesn't arrive like fireworks. Healing arrives like dawn, slow, steady, inevitable. Missing him was part of the journey, but it was never the destination. Because missing him wasn't love. It was survival. It was conditioning. It was the nervous system holding on to a story it believed it needed to stay alive. When the nervous system rewrites that story, missing him becomes a past tense, not a present experience. And that shift means something extraordinary. Your emotional oxygen no longer comes from someone who used it to suffocate you. You are breathing again. Not because he left, but because you finally stopped living inside the world he built around you. And this is the most powerful truth you will ever learn from this journey. You didn't heal from losing him. You healed from believing you needed him. Your nervous system is rewiring. Your identity is returning. Your story is expanding beyond him. And when you look back one day, you won't ask, "Why did I miss him?" You'll ask, "Why did I ever believe my heart was safest in someone who used it as a weapon?" That question is the beginning of emotional freedom. And emotional freedom isn't loud, it's consistent. If this spoke to a part of you that still aches, stay here with me. The next video explains why your nervous system keeps dreaming about him even when your mind wants to forget him, and how that dream finally begins to fade. You don't have to hurry. You don't have to prove anything. Just keep watching, keep breathing, keep choosing yourself.